Evening guys, what's going on? Well, I just want to say welcome to another video, and to all of my new subscribers and everybody who's been commenting on my videos, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And there have been a lot of good ideas going around too for some other video topics. Anyway, I look forward to reading more of those and seeing more comments and everything. So, alright guys, let's get into today's video.
In today's video, we're going to be talking about the stern of the RMS Titanic as it currently sits today on the seafloor. If you compare photos of the stern of the Titanic with that of the bow, you'll see a drastic difference in the conditions of the two parts of the ship. This is the bow of the Titanic as she currently exists today on the seafloor. And when you look at the bow, it's still clearly recognizable as the Titanic. But the stern, it really looks like a bomb hit it, and it's just a mangled pieces of metal on the seafloor. So what caused that?
You see, when the Titanic itself was sinking, as everyone knows, she struck the iceberg on the starboard side below the waterline. And it created two sinking scenarios because of how the Titanic split in two. When the Titanic was sinking, the bow flooded very slowly. So because it flooded slowly, it gave the water time to flood around inside the ship. And because of that, we had a very gentle and very easy sinking scenario for the front of the ship. But due to the way that the ship went down, because she was at this very steep angle during the ship's final moments. So that right there is the first clue to the mystery as to what happened to the stern of the Titanic.
This is the sinking animation by Titanic Honor and Glory. And as you can see from this animation, when the Titanic broke in two, it essentially created a whole other sinking scenario. The stern is still more or less 100% buoyant because there was no water inside of it at the time of the breakup. And the stern rapidly drops into the water and doesn't have time to flood in a similar way that the bow did. So due to the fact that the stern flooded and rapidly sank in this quick scenario, that is the first clue as to what happened to the stern on its way to the bottom.
Now, in order to understand completely what happened to the Titanic stern, we have to talk about pressure. Now, we all have pressure on us right now from the air we breathe. Our air is 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, and we don't even breathe nitrogen. Nitrogen is only there for pressure. When the astronauts go up into space on the space shuttle, their spacesuits, it's not just the oxygen they have to worry about, it's pressure. So the same thing is similar to the way the ocean works. Now, the ocean is a lot more dense than the air we breathe. Now that brings us to Titanic. When Titanic struck the iceberg and the bow began to sink, she went down very slowly, just like I said earlier. But because of that, it gave the bow time to properly flood. So when the bow was underwater, she was completely flooded. The bow was completely flooded, but the stern was still buoyant. So it had a lot of air inside. And due to how rapidly the stern dropped, it didn't have time to evenly flood like the bow did. So when a ship goes underwater, if it's completely flooded, the pressure on the outside is no different than the pressure on the inside. So there's no pressure difference or anything like that. But the stern still had a huge amount of air inside of it. So all of that air, like say my hands are the water, you have this air pocket or this bubble, and all of the water is wanting to get in and all the air is wanting to get out, but it can't because it's trapped. So the stern just dropped deeper and deeper into the water while the pressure was building up until finally the hull couldn't take it anymore and the ship imploded.
This sinking animation by National Geographic is a great example of what I was just talking about. As you can see, the bow is going underwater and she is completely flooded with water. So she is sinking very stably and very gradually and just dropping to the seafloor. However, the stern is still full of air and it's just now dipping beneath the surface, but the air is still completely trapped inside and the stern can't flood the way the bow did. So the stern just implodes, as you see right here. And at that point, the stern just begins to rip itself apart. It's spiraling through the water, not going down stably, and the more she falls, the more and more stuff starts to rip off because she is structurally compromised from the implosion.
And you're probably wondering, how do we know that the ship imploded like that? How do we know about air pockets and stuff? Well, we actually have some evidence that also backs up these claims. Many of the survivors that were waiting in the lifeboats and stuff like that said that about 30 seconds to a minute after the Titanic disappeared, they heard and felt a loud explosion under the water. And they said that the ocean, say my hands on the surface of the ocean, they said the ocean actually shook a little bit. And what people commonly believe today was that was the stern of the Titanic when it finally imploded due to the pressure underwater. Now, before you all say in the comments, well, if the stern was still full of air and stuff, why did she sink so rapidly? And the stern was already structurally compromised from the breakup. The watertight seals were broken, and she was rapidly flooding. I don't want you all to think that the entire stern was still 100% full of air. It wasn't. There were huge air pockets inside the stern, but the stern was rapidly flooding at the time of the breakup. If the stern hadn't been so structurally compromised, and the watertight compartments had been sealed and not, like if it had been a clean break, not the jagged break that we actually see on the wreck, the stern possibly could have lasted longer and we could have had a restart sinking scenario where the stern would slowly flood like the bow did. But that isn't what happened. The stern was greatly structurally compromised when it went under, and it just dropped so fast at that point that the water didn't have time to completely flood. Thus is why we have major air pockets. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video and found it very entertaining, and I hope you learned something today. Anyway, please hit that subscribe button, and please give my video a like. And yeah, guys, keep up the good work. All your support means a lot. I really appreciate it. And leave any comments or any other video ideas or anything that you have. I try to read all my comments. Anyway, guys, I hope you have a good evening, and I'll see you in the next one.